Muhammad's life was in real danger.
His wife is dead, his uncle is dead. Although he has followers, many of them are being tortured, imprisoned, persecuted. He is powerless to help many of those that he loves and many of those that have believed in him.
It is in this devastating time, as Muhammad came to the end of his resources, that he had his greatest mystical experience. On a night in 620, Muhammad was again awakened by the angel Gabriel. The angel presented him with a winged horse-like creature that flew the prophet through the night sky to Jerusalem. There he was greeted by Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and all the other prophets. At last, the creature took him higher and higher beyond earthly space and time. Muhammad departed his physical body, and his spirit at last stood at the summit of the universe. His celestial journey to Jerusalem suggested to Muhammad that he was entering into a new phase of his service to God and Islam. He now also understood that he could no longer remain in Mecca. Over 200 miles to the north of ancient Mecca lay the fertile oasis of Yathrib. It was a lush island of green amidst harsh volcanic mountains and untillable desert soil. Its sweet water and abundant crops of grain and dates made for a comfortable life. But Yathrib was troubled. The tribes who lived in this beautiful place were locked in a deadly state of rivalry. Crammed together in this small oasis, the tribes were caught up in a continuing pattern of warfare and violence. Something was needed to break the pattern. In the same year he had made his mystical night flight to Jerusalem, Muhammad met 6 pilgrims from Yathrib, making the annual pilgrimage, or Hajj, to the Kaaba in Mecca. He told the men of his mission and recited the verses from the Quran. The men were immediately moved by Muhammad's message, but they also saw in the prophet someone who could mediate the stalemate of violence in Yathrib. They made him an offer. The citizens of Yathrib would submit to Allah. In exchange, Muhammad would become their leader.
Muhammad was invited to a community that was in many ways divided and in disarray. And they basically invited him, saying that they needed a strong leader to come in and to organize and lead that community.
Muhammad saw a chance to expand Islam in Yathrib. He also saw a haven that would protect him and his followers from persecution. He urged all Muslims to pack their things and leave Mecca for a new life. It was a dangerous undertaking, but the Muslims were willing to take their chances. Muhammad and his closest disciples stayed behind until most of his followers had left Mecca. Quraysh leaders soon realized that once Muhammad left, he would be beyond their control and would become a leader of their rivals and possible enemies. The choice was made. Muhammad must die before he reached the new land. So that no one clan would have to bear responsibility, it was decided that one member of each would plunge a sword into Muhammad at the same time. The men frantically searched Mecca, but Muhammad had been warned of the threat and had made his escape. The following morning, horsemen pursued Muhammad and at last followed his trail to the entrance of a cave. Muhammad and a disciple were hiding inside. But Muslim tradition says the Quraysh assassins found a pigeon nesting at the cave's mouth and the entrance covered with a spider web. The Quraysh concluded no one could be inside. Allah had protected his prophet. The flight from Mecca in 622 is known to Muslims as the Hijrah. No event has greater importance in the culture of Islam. It became the start of the Muslim calendar.
It was because it was the start of the establishment of the Muslim community. So that unlike the Gregorian calendar that starts with the birth date of Christ, the Muslim calendar, or the Islamic calendar, which is based on the lunar calendar, is one that is based on this concept of community.
When Muhammad arrived in Yathrib, people rushed to meet him and all wanted the honor of having him stay in their house. Instead, Muhammad allowed his favorite camel, Qaswa, to wander unguided through the town. When at last Qaswa stopped and fell to her knees, Muhammad declared that was the spot where he would live. He ordered work to begin on a house and the first mosque. Henceforth, Yathrib would be called Medina, a name simply meaning the city. But the greatest change would be in the very nature of the community itself. Muhammad's visions brought new words to unite both his own followers from Mecca and the people of Medina. The Quran now had a new verse.
Those who believed and made the hijrah, and those who gave their homes and helped, these are the protectors of one another.
What he began to create in Medina was something that was absolutely unheard of and novel in Arabia. It was a community bound together by an ideal, by a shared ideology, by a shared religion, not by blood. He was creating, as it were, a super tribe where people were not related to one another, but they were related to one another in faith and by agreement.
If you think about 7th century Arabia being based on tribal kinship, the idea of a community based on a faith that anyone could join, slave, woman, man, rich, poor, dark, light, was revolutionary, and of course, very menacing for some.
To further unite the Muslim peoples, Muhammad ended his mourning for Khadijah and began to take new wives. In all, he would marry 11 women from many different tribes and clans. About 7 months after the Muslims arrived in Medina, the first mosque was completed. It contained a large courtyard for saying prayers. Several methods were considered for calling Muslims to prayer. A ram's horn, like the Jews, a bell, like the Christians. Finally, it was decided that only a human voice was needed to proclaim the call to prayer that Muhammad taught his people. A young man was selected to make the call, and for the first time, Muslims heard the words that still echo from mosques around the world, beckoning all to come to God.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
I bear witness that there is no God but Allah. I bear witness that Muhammad is the apostle of God. Come to prayer. Come to prayer.
Muhammad had believed he was calling the faith